So hello everyone, it's National Remember a Charity in Your Will Week, and here at Autism Together we have a whole week of different things going on, including some personal stories from myself and some other people too. But today we're joined here by Katie and Dylan from Guardian Angel. Hi guys. And they're going to tell us a bit about what they do and the fact that they offer free wills to our supporters here at Autism Together. So I'll hand on to you guys, and at the end I do have some questions to put to you as well.
Awesome, thanks Chloe. So I'm Dylan. Thanks to everyone for watching and joining us today. We're going to go through a little bit more about the free will writing service that's being offered, and we're delighted to be in partnership with the charity, and especially during such an important week as Remember a Charity Week. I've got my colleague Katie here, if you want to say a quick hello.
Hi.
And we've got a few slides we're going to talk you through today, just in terms of what the will writing service looks like, how you can access it, and some couple of things when it comes to writing your will. I'm going to turn on my screen share now and do the compulsory, can you see this? Can I have a thumbs up? We all good? Awesome. Alrighty. So as I said, we are delighted to be doing a partnership with Autism Together in terms of a free will writing service. I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about kind of who we are as a company, and explain a bit more about why we kind of are in the will writing industry at all, really. We've got a photo on the left here, which is our founder Sam and his mum, who are pictured here. Sam's mum unfortunately actually died in 2016 in a car accident, and as you can see, Sam's still quite a youngish guy. Went through the process of bereavement, as many people did, and found it incredibly difficult, and wanted to, on the back of that, try and do something that would help people who are in a similar position. What Sam initially launched was, back in 2018, was Guardian Angel, and the first thing that we did was actually to help bereaved families. So we did a lot of work with those who have recently lost a loved one, in terms of helping them through the bereavement process. And one of the things that we've kind of discovered in helping those families are that when it comes to end of life preparation, it's not something that many people in the UK are that prepared for. And one of the first things you can do to help get your affairs in order, should the worst happen, is to, for example, do your will. And it's one thing that we're really passionate about now, is that getting people to think about their own end of life affairs. You never know quite what's coming. Certainly with Sam's experience, it was an unexpected death, and obviously from there, his world, their family's world, was turned up ends. And one of the first things you can do to, as I said, make things easier for your own family or your own friends, is to start to think about getting your affairs in order. And writing your will now these days has become such an easy thing to do. There's really no excuse that you shouldn't have one done. We are now one of the largest will writing teams in the whole of the UK. Delighted to partner with about 100 charities across the UK as well, as a free will service to help even more people get their affairs in order. In terms of, we often like to ask, what are some of the biggest events of your life? What would you kind of think of to be the really standout moments? For a lot of people, it's potentially having a child, or having their first child particularly, maybe getting married or divorced, depending on how things are going, possibly buying or moving house as well. For us, it's actually death. In terms of the economical impact it's going to have in your life, there is nothing in terms of that even begin to compare in terms of dividing up your estate, dividing up where your money is going to go when you die. Obviously, in terms of the emotional impact as well, in terms of friends and family who are left behind, it is by no shadow of a doubt in our minds the single biggest turning point in your life, which sounds a bit morbid to say, but really, if you kind of break it down into the key components, it is something that we should all be thinking about more than we like to. Especially as Brits, we can be a bit funny talking about death and dying, and it's something that we think is really important for people to actually approach, because of all of the events that you can have in your life, it's the one that you know is going to come at some point. So why not kind of prepare for that as best you can? Why you might need a will? Well, it is one of the most important documents you'll ever sign legally. It's not just about where you want your money to go, which is one of the biggest misconceptions, that it's all about people who have got lots of money and then where they want it to be split between. Of course, that is a big important side of it in terms of where you'd like your money to go after you die, but it's so much more than that as well. It's also the only legal way to appoint guardians for both children and pets. It's one of those things, especially if people who've got children, you should have a backup of some sort so that if the worst was to happen, you know where your children are going to go. And similarly with pets, or if you're like me and prefer animals to humans, I'd much rather my dog gets taken care of than anything else. You can also, through a will, protect your assets from things like survivor remarrying and care home costs as well. So you can make sure that the money would go in a way you want it to. It's not necessarily, in terms of inheritance laws, they can be slightly complex. It might not always go where you want it to unless you have a will in place. And traditionally, wills have been written with a solicitor, what we call kind of face-to-face in the office, or potentially over the phone as well. It's now increasingly common for people to write their will online, as we live in a world these days where people like to do things online. You know, if you think of the way that people shop, it's, you know, looking at things like Amazon, maybe you might do your shopping online. We're kind of moving into a world now where people like to be able to do stuff online if they can. It's actually probably the fastest way to write your will. We like to think it's incredibly quick, easy, and fairly hassle-free as well, in terms of us guiding you through the process, which I'll come back to in a couple of seconds' time. So why do you need a will? We really think that everybody over the age of 18 in the UK should have a will. It becomes kind of even more important, as we touched upon, if you do have children, obviously in terms of looking after them, where they're going to go. If you get married and divorced, in terms of making sure your assets go where you'd like them to, or to avoid people deliberately. Or of course, if you've got property, as you'll need to decide where these assets go if you die. Some facts around will writing that you might not know. It's an estimated about 70% of the UK don't have an up-to-date will. So that's, as you can imagine, a little bit scary from our perspective, in terms of, again, being the one event that we know is coming. By up-to-date as well, it's good practice to review your will every 5 years to make sure it's still current with your wishes. So maybe that you already have a will in place, but if you think about when you did it, it could have been 10, 15, 20 years ago. I'm sure a lot has changed in your lifetime that may want you to kind of reconsider where your money would go and how you'd want your funeral wishes to look. It's up to last year, about 12% of people that died left a gift to charity in their will as well. It's one thing that's becoming increasingly more common, is people leaving charitable gifts in their will as a thank you, or as a way to support charities even after they've gone. And actually doing so can potentially can reduce your inheritance tax bill. So it can actually decrease the amount of money that goes to the tax man, which I know for a lot of people is a huge incentive to give to charity, rather than just philanthropically as well. The longest will that was ever written was at 95,940 words over 4 volumes by Miss Frederica Cook. It was a lady in the UK who had an enormous assets collection and went to quite some detail as to how she'd like it to be administered. Not everybody's will is that complicated, I will add. With most people, we don't have to go into the volumes. You can do it on a few pages, but always interested to see how people want to kind of divide up their affairs. We often get asked kind of what happens if I don't have a will in place. The technical term for that is called dying intestate. So it simply means that you have died without a will in place of any sort. What you may not know is that everybody in the UK actually does already have a will. It's basically according to government guidelines in terms of how your will, well, how your estate would be administered. Most of us don't know that, and it doesn't often go the way that you potentially choose for your money to. It's kind of dependent on existing family and relatives. It's estimated that the cost of dying intestate is about £9,700. This is mostly through lost assets. So in terms of where people are unable to find potentially bank accounts or different stocks and shares, potentially a property of some sort, effectively where the people who are administering the estate can't actually find the assets because they don't know that they exist. There is it's quite common for people to have, not everything listed out into one place, and it can be obviously then costly in terms of your estate not being fully administered and the full value not being shown to those who would be kind of inheriting it. As I mentioned, your estate would be divided up to government regulations. So this follows, again, a slightly complicated system, but it's effectively done through the existing families and or family relatives that you still have. Again, it might not necessarily be the way you'd want it to be administered. The other thing to bear in mind, of course, is that your family would have no chance to decide on your funeral or wake without any input from you. Now, when it comes to your funeral, it really should be a day that's all about you. It should be something that we all think about individually and go, this is what I would like my big day to look like. It's not something that should ideally be left up to the family to decide, especially as it does add an additional layer of emotional complexity to an already pretty difficult day. If we go back to Sam's family, for example, they didn't know if Sam's mum would like to be buried or cremated, and that can be quite a difficult decision to make for a family obviously without any input. And I'm sure most of you know, if we asked you kind of, would you rather be buried or cremated, you have a pretty quick yes or no, or you know which answer you prefer it to be. So it's something that unless you actually tell your family or write it down somewhere, how are they really to know? So it's really important to kind of think about these kind of things as well. And if you do die without a will and you have no remaining family it can be traced to, the money all goes to the crown. So dependent on how you feel about royalty, you may want it to, you may be horrified at that idea. So something that a lot of us don't know is that it would eventually end up back in the hands of the crown. So something that's definitely worth thinking about as well in terms of why you should get the will in place. What's the process like? So we're going to talk a little bit about online will writing specifically. Effectively, what we've tried to do is make it as easy to use as possible. So it's as simple as creating an account. We'll then guide you through a series of steps, which will make up the kind of the parts of the will that we need. So basic info such as things about you, your family, your financial assets, where you'd like your estate to be administered. There are a few optional sections as well, such as things like funeral wishes or gifts, which allow you a kind of a level of personalization to your will so that you can really make it about you and the things, the people and the charities that you cared about in your lifetime. What you're able to do as well is then decide about where you'd like money to go to charity. So we've got the example here of somebody, we've got Jane Smith, who might be looking to leave 10% to Autism Together as a charity. What we'll do is guide you through the process and make sure you've got all the information that you need to make these decisions. Of course, not all of us are legal experts. Most of us will think that it's a lot of legal jargon. What we've tried to do is make it easy to understand so that even if you've never written a will before in your life and you have no idea what it entails, hopefully you'll be able to kind of guide through the steps, get through all the information that you need to make the informed decisions on where you'd like your estate to go, and obviously fill out all of the sections properly. From there, we'll check everything over as well. So don't worry if you've made any mistakes that we think aren't quite right. We'll always get in touch to let you know that potentially want to review things. If you've missed off things like postcodes as well, we'll also correct that for you. So it does get checked by a member of our team before it then obviously needs to be printed, signed and witnessed, as any other form of will writing will do. Some of the things you might want to consider throughout this process. First and foremost, of course, where do you want your money to go? Your estate is the word that we use to effectively, once all of your assets have been added up, your estate is what that's the kind of collective name for it. So where would you like that to kind of be split between? This is usually done as a percentage. So you could decide I want 50% to go to my partner and 10% to each of the children, or whatever that may look like. So obviously you need to have a think about where you want some of your inheritance to go and to the people that you'd like to split between. Of course, that's touched upon as well. Guardians, both for children and pets, are really important. One thing as well, obviously, it can be, well, it is legally binding in terms of guardianship. You'll probably want to speak to the people you're appointing as guardians before you put them into your will, rather than writing them in and not having the conversation, because if you were to die, suddenly they're going to have a very awkward situation on their hands if they had no idea. So always worth speaking to potential guardians before you actually appoint them into your will. You may also want to think about specific gifts or messages for certain people. So part of the will writing software allows messages for everything that you're giving. So for example, if you're giving a special set of earrings, or if you're giving your car or your collection of fabulous CDs, you can include a message as to why you want that person to receive that gift. It's something that is, excuse me, is actually really an emotionally important part of the bereavement as well. So I know that for Sam, when his mum died, the one thing that he's really clung on to out of everything else was her running jumper. So she used to go out every day, walk the dogs, and she'd have this specific jumper that she wore. That's kind of what his most treasured item is, because emotionally, that's a big attachment to it. So it wasn't about money. It wasn't about anything particularly of high value. It was something that really reminds him of his mum and the habits that she used to do day to day. Now, of course, if you were to be able to gift people that with a message, it can be such an important part of the bereavement and grieving process to be kind of remembered. But you know, often it's not just money, it's the specific objects that kind of that really made or spoke about your personality and your habits that are really important to people who are left behind. You may, of course, want to consider leaving money to charity as well. That's what Remember a Charity Week is all about. It's becoming, as I said, increasingly unpopular for people to leave money to charity, not just because there are potential tax benefits, but obviously, you know, it's a wonderful way to give money. Obviously, it doesn't cost you a penny today either. And of course, it means that, you know, from a philanthropic feel-good factor, you can continue to support a charity's work even after you've died. And you know, I'm sure if you kind of speak to Autism Together, they'll be able to tell you potentially how the money would be used for such a great cause. The other thing you might want to think about is in terms of disinheritance. So is there anybody that you really want to leave out of your will for whatever reason? Again, can be particularly common, especially if you've obviously kind of gone through marriage and divorce, etc. There may be different people that you really don't want the money to go to. So it's something you can kind of clarify as well throughout the will writing process. The final thing is in terms of funeral wishes as well. So as kind of touched on earlier, your family, it's very hard for those who are left behind to decide what your funeral would have looked like without any of your input. So you may want to think about not just buried versus cremated, you may want to think about music, dress code, how you want to be remembered, if you'd like it to be a natural a natural funeral setting or an eco burial of some sort. So that's something that's really important to think about as well. As I kind of mentioned, we can add in notes as well. So this is not just to leaving gifts to loved ones and to friends. You can also leave notes to charities that you're leaving money to as well. So we've got one here that was written by a will writer who's kindly left a gift to Autism Together. So Autism Together's children and family services have been so helpful. Thank you for your support. I hope my legacy helps more families like mine in the future. So you can imagine, obviously, a wonderful message. This is obviously somebody who has really benefited from the amazing work that the charity is doing. It's an amazing thing to be able to kind of pass that on to the next generation or the next group of people that may need that care in the future. What a wonderful way to kind of say thank you for the work that they do. So how to get a free will? Well, we've talked a lot about online will writing today. It's not just online that you can do. You're also able to access the telephone will writing service that we offer, or the face-to-face as well. If you'd still rather do things the old-fashioned way and see a solicitor, we can obviously arrange that as well. You're entitled to a free, simple, or standard will. For most of you, that will be absolutely fine. There are certain things that may make will writing slightly more complex. These tend to include things like assets overseas, or if you want to gift specific property or put in kind of certain types of trusts. Those would, I think we're going to kind of talk about in a little bit later, but those would potentially incur additional cost. But by and large, for most people who are writing their will, unless you have huge assets that you need to divide up, a simple will or a standard will would be absolutely what you need. One of the things that we offer as part of the online service that's worth knowing about as well is unlimited changes to your will. We have a subscription service. It's entirely optional. It's free for the first year as well, so you can always try it for a year and see how you like it and then cancel afterwards. And from then on, it's just £10 a year afterwards. What that means is you can come back, edit your will, update it as life changes. Obviously, for a lot of us, like, you know, if you are in a stage of buying and moving houses, having more children, or getting married and divorced, things may change and you may want your will to reflect that. So potentially something to think about as well. What you'll also have access to is our end-of-life planning tool, which is called Bo. What this means is you can take a digital end-of-life planning quiz to see how prepared you are if the worst was to happen tomorrow, and obviously include things like advice and ways to improve upon your score if you're looking to get more prepared. All you'll need to do to access the offer, if you go to the Autism Together pages, there should be information there and links through to how to access it. You'll need the code for the online, which is on Autism Together free, which you can enter at the checkout to discount your will for free. Alternatively, if you're phoning up to use our telephone and face-to-face services, just quote that you're calling from Autism Together and we'll know that you're entitled to a free will. The one thing to note as well, the online will writing service only applies to those who live in England and Wales. If you are a resident of Scotland, Northern Ireland, I'm afraid it would have to be the telephone or face-to-face service, but obviously you are still able to benefit from a free will. So I think that just about wraps us up. Katie, over to you.
Shall we hand it over to questions?
Yeah, that's great. I just want to say thank you, Dylan, for that was amazing, a brilliant presentation. Well done. But also because a lot of it really touched base with me. So I'm only 32. I have a 4-year-old child, and I'd always thought about making a will when we bought a house and then when we had our first child. It always crossed my mind, but something I never got round to doing. And then particularly relevant this year. So my sister passed away in April. She was aged 34, and it was an incredibly unexpected and quick death. So my sister, obviously being 34, me being 32, she didn't have a will, and I didn't have a will. So, and she was a single parent to a 2-year-old. So at that time, when we very quickly lost my sister and had so much to deal with, we also had all the other issues of the fact that she hadn't written a will. And how complicated that was at a time that we didn't need it to be. And also when it came to planning her funeral, like you mentioned, we'd never discussed that, so we didn't really know what her wishes were. The same with Sam. So this year especially, it made it really prevalent to me that it didn't matter my age. And, you know, me and my sister probably thought we were invincible, being only in our early 30s. And now I am legal guardian to her 2-year-old. But the process of that would have been so incredibly easy if she had written a will. So the reading and listening to your presentation has just made it so much more important. And that's why this year with Autism Together, we're kind of focusing on those younger age groups, because especially with what's happened to me and the fact that I work in the fundraising team of this charity, it's mainly about making sure people are prepared and aware. And it doesn't necessarily always mean that you have to leave a gift to charity. Obviously that would be fantastic, but I think what we're trying to find and push for people to do is to make a will, and why it's so important, especially when you're caring for children with additional needs and you're always wondering about the future and what support they're going to have when you're not here. So it was great that you've been able to share that, and also Sam's personal story. And that's what we really love about Guardian Angel, is that you guys are really approachable, and you listen and you understand. So huge thanks for you guys sharing that story there and for letting us know how easy it is to make a will. So we have had a few questions in advance. I'm going to throw them at you, so brace yourselves. I hope you're ready. So the first one was, are there any hidden costs to making the will? So you mentioned a little bit briefly there about additional costs. If you could just recap over that for me a little bit, that would be great.
Yeah, effectively, as I said, the offer that we're promoting is for a free, simple or standard will, which for most people out there, it will be the case. There are certain things, as you can imagine, with some will writing, if we think of Mrs. Federica Cook and her 4 volumes, it can get more complex. There are certain things that would potentially make it more complex, which are usually things like assets overseas. If you've got kind of property or shares abroad, or if you've got a bank account, it may be that you need a more complex will to cover those as part of your overall estate. If you're looking to gift property as well, that's usually done via a trust. Similarly, any kind of other trust work is usually incurring of an additional cost, which obviously that again makes a will slightly more complex. So the way that worked for a supporter is that the will would still be free, so you'd still benefit from a free will writing service and a free will overall. You just have to cover any additional costs for additional legal work. So for example, you have an assets overseas and you need an insertion of your will to cover that asset, there may be an additional cost. Of course, we'll talk you through the whole process. This would all be done via our telephone and face-to-face will writing teams, because it can't actually be done online. We talk you through your requirements, what we think is going to be best suited, and obviously then have a no obligation quote to look at and go, well, this is going to be the estimated cost of the legal services. If you're happy to proceed, then great, let us know. If not, no harm done. You've got the information to hand, and at least you know for the future the kind of thing that potentially be involved to, as if your will is more complex as well. So again, we're always kind of more than happy to advise as well. If you've got any kind of questions around your own circumstances, best thing to do is to give us a call, and we can kind of go through what your will may look like based upon certain circumstances.
Brilliant. It's great that you can just let us know a quote of how much it would be additionally and still have that free will separate. So that's brilliant. Thank you very much. So the next question we got was, is it easy to change your will once it's been made? And do you send us prompts to remind us to change it? Because obviously I'm only 32, I could make it now and then just completely forget that I've made it.
Katie, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. So as Dylan mentioned in his presentation, once you've written your will, if you get the first year for free, and then following that there's a £10 yearly subscription. But that's a really easy way that you can then go in and edit your will without having to create a whole new one. So you can literally just go to the section that you want to update or edit, and then save it. You will obviously have to reprint that will out and get it witnessed to make it legal. But that's what makes online wills so kind of easy and accessible and easy to update as as things change. In regards to prompts, Dylan, do you want to take that?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that obviously very conscious of is people keeping their will up to date. We will kind of once in a while, we don't send lots and lots of marketing emails, but we will once in a while send things that you may want to think about. So for example, if it's been a couple of years since you wrote your will with us, we will be kind of prompting you to remind you, say, hey, don't forget, it's been a couple of years, has anything changed? Similarly with things such as we recently this year brought out an online lasting power of attorney documents software. That's something that a lot of people don't have in place. It's even less, if you look at the statistics around will writing as opposed to that, it's even scarier around how many people don't have LPAs in place. So those are the kind of things that we might kind of email you to remind you of and say, well, if you've not got something like this in place, these are some things you might want to think about as well. So, but of course, you're welcome to unsubscribe from marketing emails if you'd rather not hear from us at all.
Brilliant. I know that's really going to benefit me. With 2 kids, I forget a lot of things at the moment. So question number 3 is, I don't have any spare cash at the moment. Do I still need to make a will, even though there's not much money in my bank account?
Yeah, I could do that one. So I'd say, yeah, like a will isn't all about the money that you have or the assets that you have. It can also be about sentimental items. For example, when I wrote my will, I've got some jewellery that was from my mum who passed away, and I put in my will that I want actually those to go to my sister. So, and then like wrote in like a nice message like you can do with the Guardian Angel online platform. So if there are things like that, I'd really encourage people to still get to write their will. Also things like funeral wishes, or yeah, if you've got kids or guardians. So it's not just about how much cash you have or kind of if you own a property or not. There's lots of other things that a will can help you cover.
Brilliant, thank you. Number 4, how do we ensure that the money I leave my children won't affect their benefits? So this is particularly prevalent for a lot of the people that we support. So their children are receiving disability benefits and all those other type of things that are connected to that. So it's about ensuring that the money they receive isn't going to affect those things. These are the questions we get asked a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you receive money as inheritance, that isn't earned income, so it won't affect any kind of disability income that you're getting. So yeah, it won't affect it at all.
Brilliant, thank you. And last one, if all of my children's next of kins then die, how would the money that I leave them be administered? So for example, when a child is in care, maybe they're being supported by us as a charity, and their next of kin is like their brother or the sister is looking after the money that's being administered. What happens when they die? So there is no other surrounding family kind of thing.
So I think this is where like the will is really important, because you can think about those kind of situations, and then it can be administered kind of as the will states. Then I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Well, one of the things is in terms of what's quite common to do for will writing is to appoint, so you appoint beneficiaries such as, where you'd like the money to go, and you can appoint substitute ones as well. In terms of obviously if there are kind of next of kin who have passed, you may, of course, if they're involved in any way in your will, wish to update it to make sure that it's as up to date as it can be. Of course, it might be if we're talking about kind of children and descendants, of course, you've already died, the money's already been passed on. It'd be quite unlikely for the generation below you to have passed beforehand in most cases. Not to say that it's impossible. So it's something to think about in terms of beneficiaries and substitutes as well. That's something you can appoint as, in the case of, for example, I've left my money to Katie, but Katie has died. I want to back up as Chloe, and that's where the money will go.
Brilliant. I think it's also like what you mentioned earlier is to, if you're leaving a guardianship for your children, it's making sure that they're aware that you've mentioned them in their will, because that could also be another level, couldn't it, of the money being administered by them. So making sure that they also have a will for that scenario, and notes kind of thing we can add to the will and stuff. So that's all the questions we've got today, but obviously I'm sure you guys are welcome for phone calls if anyone does have any particular questions that they would like to ask. But thank you so much, Dylan and Katie, for joining us today. It's been brilliant, and throughout the rest of this week we are going to be sharing lots of other hints and tips, some personal stories as well, and trying to make sure that we encourage you all to leave to make a will. And if you choose to leave a gift to a charity, that's incredible too. But the importance is to make sure that we're all prepared, and as you said, talking about death. We should never feel invincible, and we should always be prepared no matter how morbid you might think it is. It's actually quite a positive thing to celebrate, and to organise your own funeral and all those things too. So
and not just to organise it, to be creative with it as well. We've
yes.
seen things such as people wanting to be fired out of cannons, they want to be flown into space with their ashes. There's some really cool stuff that people have put on there. Not all of it, I think, entirely possible, but it's good to have.
It's just making sure that they're involved, isn't it, really? Like with my sister, although she didn't leave a will, she was a massive Harry Potter fan. So yeah, Harry Potter music was all over that funeral and bright coloured clothing and all sorts. So yes, making sure your wishes are known is also really important. But yeah, thank you very much, Dylan and Katie, and everyone else for watching today. Bye.
Bye.